Well, I'm here live with the Herald of Zeech. Many of you might have seen him from several of my battle reports and several upcoming. He is the Dark Elf player that repeatedly kicks my butt every chance he gets. And today we will be discussing how to go about building a list and the different objectives of building a list, be it thematic or for a special purpose. So, Harold, why don't you introduce yourself? And yeah, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I'm the so-called Herald of Zinj. I'm friends with Tomahawk outside of our little internet lives here. And basically, when it comes down to it, we play all the time. We discuss this. It's very prevalent in our lives. And we have a lot of the time discussions on this sort of thing. And we have differing opinions, but it's an interesting topic. So we figured we'd bring it to you guys. Um, don't take his word for it. I don't beat him all the time. It's just he's got a skewed perception of what it actually means. He still thinks 18 happens after 4, so that's not real. So I think the first thing we want to get into at this point is what is a list, and kind of like what is the purpose of different designing in different ways. Do you have
Definitely.
any? Yeah. Do you have any
But
particular feelings as to what defines a list?
I do. But before we do that, can you give us a bit of background as to like your history into Warhammer?
Oh, you want to go that far? Okay. So when it comes down to it, my history for Warhammer, I've been doing it for quite a long time. Um, can't really count years at this point. I don't remember. But basically, I've kind of done it in all aspects. I've participated in everything from like super casual events to more larger tournaments. Not quite a grand tournament because we live in Canada where there's aren't too many of those. But I prefer to play casually, because I'm sort of lazy. But I also really like to follow the competitive scene because it's an interesting armchair sport almost. I have a lot of opinions. Some of them may or may not be based on anything relevant. I like to talk a lot, so you'll find that I speak a lot of words. Some of them may or not make a lot of sense. In terms of Warhammer itself, I have a bunch of different armies. My primary two are my Dark Elves and my Warriors of Chaos. My Warriors of Chaos are kind of on a bench right now because I'm painting them, and they were my first fantasy army, and the initial run of them was really not great in terms of paint scheme. So I've kind of banished them to the shelf until I can get something less awful on them. I'm having fun with my Dark Elves. I normally run really goofy lists. I don't try to do like the whole metagamey thing, 3 Hydras and a Cauldron of Blood and Brick Experiment or something like that. But competitiveness, I can move more in that direction if need be. The last battle report that Matt and I did, the list I wrote was probably closer to something you'd find it at a grand tournament, but still not 100% there. Like I'm running, spearmen in general. I'm running a level 2 on foot. It's not it doesn't dedicate itself 100% to the thing. I also play a lot of strategy games in general, but in terms of wargaming, my two primaries are obviously Warhammer 40k and fantasy. I do heavily enjoy the augmented 40k that is 30k, the forge-rolled variant on it with the Horus Heresy version. When it comes down to what I think it's a really interesting take on it, plus I'm a big fluff sort of fanatic, so the added milieus of the Horus Heresy is a wonderful combination of things. When it comes to fantasy, like I said, Warriors, Dark Elves, my two favorites. I'm kind of questing or feeling out Wood Elves and Vampire Counts a little bit, but those are years away at best. So when it comes down to it, those kind of my two bedrocks in fantasy, and a little bit about me. And I think Tomahawk's a little more into the competitive scene than I am, and I think he'll be able to take that away from more than I will.
Just a bit. Just a bit. I'm a little more competitive. I mean, I'm the guy that will, smash a template or will throw my phone at a wall when, my dice abandon me. But I think you're giving yourself you're selling yourself a little short. Your dark elf list that you play is rock hard because you really understand tactics and you really understand how to play it. I mean, you're not playing my fluffy demon list or my fluffy lizardman list. You've played some pretty meta streamed lists and you've done very well against them because you really understood the tactics. I mean, I don't know. I mean, when I've turned up with two hell pits, warp lightning cannons, doom wheels, and slaves out the wazoo, you've managed to beat them all very handily and make me look foolish.
Well, I think it's also partly because my dice seem to like me better than yours like you. So it's at the end of the day, it's hard to count for that. But I think when it comes down with tactics and that sort of stuff, all kind of folds itself really nicely into the topic of list building in general, because
Yep.
lists really define what we're doing, right? And
Yep.
when Tomahawk first approached me, he said, "Yeah, we want to do a video on list building." Now, this is a long time coming. We were supposed to do this a while ago, but I'm notoriously bad for keeping engagements, so it's not on him; it's on me. The fact that this is so delayed. But in general, I think the goal for list building usually kind of keeps itself down to a few things. And I think if we just jump right into the what a list is, right? So from a high point of view, a list is the construction of your army. It's in a very general sense, it's okay. I have X amount of guys. I can organize them in X fashion, and I can do it in Y configurations. The way I design a list is my foundation for an army. Games Workshop's games are based on points. Other systems have different ways of doing it. You know, obviously things like chess or football have very defined things. They don't get to make changes. But in Warhammer, there's an art as well as a science to list building. And I think the goal of something, the providence of, you know, designing something around a key is really the list art, the art of list building. As I speak in circles here, when it comes down to it, the list is really going to accomplish a goal. Now, what that goal is up to you, but a list is always tailored around something. And generally, in games like this, it's to win, to maximize your ability to get points in whatever fashion the game allows you to, and minimizes your risk, or at least tries to, of actually giving up points and handing your opponent points that they don't more than they need to. So I think when it comes to fantasy, the philosophy of building a list kind of falls into several categories. There are different elements of this in almost every list. You can think of them kind of like percentages. The three principles of building a list are really theme, kind of a sense of what's the universality, where you can say something it's designed against all opponents or all scenarios, and then you can say it's also gimmicky, or it has a skew to it. It has like an angle or a direction that it's walking into. Now you can have a list that's kind of like perfectly situated in the triple Venn diagram, that it's equal parts theme and universality and gimmicks, or you can have lists that are 90% one thing and 10% the other two. So I think when it comes down to it, the opinions on where a list falls and the kind of overlap here is kind of where Tomahawk and I tend to disagree. But it's an interesting conversation, and we hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm still here. I definitely agree with you fully. I think that the difference that we have is kind of, I want to say the point, the I guess the almost the objective of the list, because I mean, both me and you have definitely played very competitive lists, be it in fantasy or 40k, and we've also played very fluffy lists. For me, my fluffy list would probably be Lizardmen, where I want to field dinosaurs, just as many dinosaurs as possible, and I really don't care that they kind of suck. And for you, like, you have your upcoming vampire counts list, which I don't think you would consider competitive, but it's fun. But
Not in the least.
exactly. But I think that's a good point right there. Is some lists are designed with a theme. And if, there's nothing wrong with doing a theme list, because you know what? It's cool. It's awesome. I mean, heck, if I had the willpower to do it, I would buy 14 Lothern Sky Cutters and as many Lothern Spearmen as I could, and throw them on the table and be like, yeah, this is a Sea Guard army. What? And watch as my opponents laugh at me for saying that it sucks, and I get really sad. But I mean, I bring hyper competitive lists and they suck, so I mean, whatever. But I don't know. Would you disagree that is a tier of list building, and there's nothing wrong with that?
No, actually, I think the distinction is not so much that I disagree that that's the mechanics of a list building, but to me, I just disagree in the application. It's like, to me, a theme isn't necessarily something like, that's the direction, the general overview you want to take. Like, for example, my Dark Elf list, the one that's up, the only video that you have of me up on the channel right now, the one
So
with
far.
your fantastic intro, the Herald of Tzeentch there. I think that one there, the goal of that one with the 3 Hydras and the Brick of Cauldron, the original list when I designed it was based around this a passage I read out of the Dark Elf Codex, which is called no, which describes the goddess of death, Aerith Kial. And I kind of was really intrigued because normally it's really Assyrian Cain, maybe Cornus or Aisha for the elves as being like the principal deities that are discussed as like important. But then if you look at the Rana Daldra there of the Dark Elves, the Aerith Kial seems, believe she's ranked number 2, maybe number 3 in importance. But then she's given very little credit. So I'm like, well, why is such an important goddess not spoken of very more? So I'm like, okay, if she's the goddess of death, how would this look? So basically, that's just kind of where the list designed from. And I figured, okay, what's scary, about death? You figure the underworld, you kind of go from there. Greek mythology is like Cerberus guarding the thing. Dark elves don't exactly have a 3-headed dog, but they have a 5-headed snake. So I figured hydras make a good choice. Eventually, when I get the army fully painted, when I get off my ass and start painting the damn thing, it'll be very blues. It has spirit hosts on my cauldron already because I want to do like an underworld kind of theme to it. But this is where the list building aspect sort of comes into it. Is that was my goal? I said, okay, I want to do kind of a list based on that idea. And then basically based on those parameters, I started setting myself goals. Okay, I want to do monsters. Well, the Kyberus I don't really like, so I'll stick with the Hydra. And I could take 3 of them and pretty fat. And either way, I like Kyberus, but the Minotaur. But as the list kept going, the goal of the thing was basically saying, okay, I want monsters. I want the one I like, not the one I don't like. So throw 3 of those in there. And then my list needs to be effective against things. So I'm like, okay, what are really good in the High Elf book, or the Dark Elf book, rather? Voltors. So I threw 3 or 4 in there. That works.
Voltors.
What else is effective? I threw, okay, what's a big brick of things? A big brick of frenzied characters with a cauldron of blood. That kind of materialized out of the idea that I need a big combat block to kind of run around and both deny points and both potentially get points. Especially because Shadow is such a lovely lore. It basically turns any kind of mediocre combat unit into a fantastic one, especially elves with their always strike first and murderous prowess and that sort of stuff. It kind of lets me take a kind of generally considered crappy unit, a spearman, take a bunch of them so they can survive casualties, give them the cauldron to make them goofy and sort of semi-survivable, and then I kind of go from there. A list. So my element, if I do go back to the principles of it, my theme was Aerith Kial and the kind of the underworldy kind of theme. My take all comers aspect of it is, well, I need to make this sort of theme sort of semi-competitive, and my gimmick is monsters. Let's be serious here, or Hydra specifically. I don't necessarily take, like, if I wanted to go balls deep on the monster analogy, I could take manticores and beast handlers. I could take the Kybetus as well as Hydras. I can take Malekith himself riding Seraphon or whatever. If I wanted to, I could have gone deeper into it. But
no, you're not allowed to. Your 3 Hydras are broken as a joke already. No more.
Well, I guess, debate. But when it comes down to for me, the purposes of the list, that was well enough as it is. I kind of said, okay, this is a nice medium point. It satisfied my need for theme, but it also allows me to sort of make a sort of really using air quotes here, competitive army, right? It's a functionally competitive army. It's not completely going to fall apart in the breeze, but against the really rock hard list, it's going to fall apart, right? But that's not the goal of it. The goal is to have fun. It works, strategically to a certain degree, quote unquote. But more importantly, it has the 3 elements in the varying degrees that I want. So you can say it's probably like 50% theme, 25% gimmick, and 25% in terms of universality.
And I think that's a good point to, as you alluded to earlier, that the different way to build a list do kind of cross over. I mean, another theme, it could be for either Warriors or Demon, is an all Nurgle army. I mean, that's very fluffy in terms of, a demon army sent forth by, Papa Nurgle to go kill everything. But in game, it's also pretty competitive. I mean, we all have played against, either a horde of halberd-wielding Nurgle warriors, plague drones, beast of Nurgle, and
even just basic plague bearers, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially if they have Epi, everything goes downhill real fast as soon as they get into combat.
Yep. See, that's the perfect kind of like marriage of an idea, a theme, and competitiveness, right? So, like for example, you can if you're writing a truly competitive list, like to the point of like I want to win something, right? That is the ultimate goal of the thing. I believe basically at that point you kind of zero out your theme, right? Your theme becomes winning, right? That's basically the thing. So okay, so if we look at the Dark Elf book, continuing the example, what's really effective? Doomfire Warlocks. the really high access to magic, the ability to take 1+ armor on characters, that sort of, and still make them fast cav on top of that. Sure, finish that sentence. So like, and you sort of marry these things together. Okay, bolt throwers are really effective and they're cheap, so I can kind of throw those in there, kind of willy nilly. They're also not competing for much in terms of spotting, right? They're in a
Yeah,
good
they're not
open
they're not
field.
the 35-point goblin bolt throwers that pick up 400 points a turn in one shot, right?
Well, that's a reference to another friend of ours. But when it comes down to it, I think the idea of list building is really contingent on um, an idea
Yep.
and the goal, right? So
Yep.
when it comes down to it, if I'm looking for a hyper competitive list, I can take a really heavy cav army. Right. Okay. So fast cav are good for a few reasons because A, they're hard to pin down, which means they're not really engageable, which means it's hard to get points off of them. The maneuverability offer obviously a lot of offensive abilities because in the case of like Dark Riders, for example, a core choice, they're not particularly durable with maximum 4+ armor. But if you never you never fought, and you're only kind of getting incidental shooting here and there, you don't have to worry about it that much. When it comes to Doomfire Warlocks, that's another thing entirely. With Doomfires, you're shooting magically, like with Doom Bolt, which is an amazing spell. You have Soul Blight, which turns either a really weak unit even crappier, or turns like a rock hard unit and makes it softer, right? So with the two spells that the Warlocks have, that you can kind of really give yourself a utility of like, okay, so this is a unit that's hard to pin down, hard to get points off of a lot of the time, and achieves the goal of getting me something, points, right, or killing objectives. Now you can say, okay, well, you can't completely design an army around that, like Warlock specifically. Well, you can add Dark Riders in, and then you have like a really fast cav heavy army. You say, okay, well, if the goal is to win and fast cav is my chosen vessel to do that, then I can say, okay, I'll take a lot of Dark Riders, maybe a brick of like my list currently. The one that I guess the most recent game that Tomahawk and I have played is I have 8 Dark Riders or 9 Dark Riders with Musician Standard riding around with my Sorceress, the Supreme Sorceress, I should say.
I haven't put that one up yet. It's in the
Yeah, I guess
works.
this will be spoilers, I guess. But
Oh, thanks.
then I won't say what happens. What to say
As soon
my
as you
list.
said I have 9 Dark Riders and Brolocks, they already know what happens. Because, as soon as you bring one competitive thing, all my hyper competitive lists just fall apart.
Well, since you specifically spoiled it, I guess I can say it now. Basically, the key to my victory in that game was the fact that I had fast cav that are hard to pin down, and they let me maneuver around big things like Juggernauts or Demon Princes or whatever. My utility in that is that I have something that hits hard and is hard to hit specifically. Now they're not invincible. Obviously, if everything gets a hold of them or pins them down, they're very soft. Still toughness 3, and the 4+ ward is nice, but give me enough dice, I'm going to fail a bunch of them, and then I lose 25-point Warlocks every time. Wood Elves do a fantastic job versus them. It's like, hey, look, we don't really care about modifiers. We're just going to give you a bunch of dice. So again, nothing's completely foolproof, but then that comes down to the second principle we talked about in list building, which is kind of a take all commerce thing. If I realize that my fast cav army has deficiencies versus one thing, I can kind of build in redundancies or say fail safes when it comes to dealing with those things. So if I have a problem with Wood Elves or any kind of like ballistic skill based shooting, I can say, well, I can take like a brick of Corsairs or something that kind of sure up the center and say, okay, I've got a fightier meteor unit that'll hold points and counter these sort of like incidental shooting things. Or somebody's like, well, I've got like a steam tank. Well, the fast cav kind of do that on their own because they get around it really quickly and they can move far out of the way that the random movement doesn't help it so much. So the goal of a list is to have like a goal. That's a great sentence there. The purpose of a list is to say, if it's competitive, it's to win. You have a chosen avenue for that. In this example, it's fast cav. And then you say, okay, what are my weaknesses? X, and then you build in a counter for that Y, right? So if it's ballistic skill based shooting, you take like a tougher brick. If it's war machines, you can take shades or something, or there's myriad of different answers. But I think,
And I think, sorry, just to cut you off there, I think that
go ahead.
ties very good into the two different ways of looking at this is to build, like you said, the all-comers list versus to build a ski list.
Yeah, or a gimmicky list, yeah.
Or a gimmicky list, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. I just like that's how I kind of like to phrase it myself. But see, when it comes down to it, I think if a list is entirely focused on one goal, right? Delivering X magic or combat heavy character into destination and then letting him do the job, or war machining the hell out of the opponent and praying to God they don't get to me. These are really rigid, tactically inflexible armies, but they still provide a really good avenue of winning. Like, for example, you take the dwarf example. Dwarves generally, like, okay, if we could just spend war points on war machines alone, they would do it. But because they have to buy dwarves, they buy guys to defend the guns, right? They also may spend points to like protect the guns and things like in kind of roundabout ways, like gyrocopters or runesmiths to shut down magic phases, right? Basically, these are things that help protect their win condition, which is the war machine and shooting, right? Because a combat dwarf army can sort of work if they're running at you, but if you have to get to them, it's not a really viable option because dwarves are so slow. So basically, you default back to I'm shooting, so I need to make my shooting as optimal as possible. That means my cannons have to keep shooting, my organ guns have to keep going, and basically by optimizing your setup and by protecting your win condition, you're creating a list that is as viable as you can get it. You and I have had games with your dwarves. My so-called scary dark elf list got absolutely dismantled by a dwarf game because, again, the cannons and organ guns and fighty guys that are more durable than spearmen just totally, rocked rocked the scissors that is my army, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's that's it, right? When it comes down to it, a competitive thing is something that has a goal, has strengths, acknowledges those strengths and uses them to the best of their advantage, but then also has weaknesses and does its best to either counteract or to kind of like push up against weaknesses as best as possible. So like a jack of all trades list, a toolbox, if you would. For me, that's the kind of like the goal of like a competitive list. At least that's my preference, is that if I'm writing a competitive one, I don't know what I'm going to be facing from game to game. So if you take the 5 tournament example, if over the course of 5 games I'm playing 5 different armies that have 5 different goals, and I have one goal, there's going to be a very kind of coin flip as to like, okay, if my goal does well against his, then I'm going to do well. But if his is something that's better against mine, then I lose, right? So for
Yep.
me, a rounded list is a more useful one because it can deal with all these sort of things rather than banking on him not having something or them not having one specific thing. If my list has one Achilles heel, one piece of kryptonite, to me that's a fault list, or there's a fault in the list. But that's my philosophy. I like controlling the variables. That's why I like frenzy is nice on my main block, but I would never kind of do the whole everything's frenzy, corn, chariots or juggernaut spam or other sort of stuff. Like, it's not my style. I can see why it's appealing, but it's not my preference. I like things that are reliable in a vacuum, regardless of almost anything, regardless of mission, dice rolls, spells, opponents, whatever. I think this is
Based
where Tomahawk
based
and I
on
difference.
yeah, I just deleted that. Based to you, do you think there's a problem with that mindset, or is it okay? I mean, I think it's a interesting way to look at the two different ways to build a list, but I mean, either way is okay, right?
Yeah, it's not a problem.
Like, I
It's
don't
just
think
it's
there's
your own
wrong with
preference.
exactly, right? There's nothing wrong with it. You just have to, I think, when you go into games, you have to have the mindset that this is what I'm gonna do. If they have that rock to my scissors, then I lose, and you have to be willing to accept that. I mean, as a Warriors player for several years now, I know that when I put my Demon Prince on the field, I'm gonna live by the sword and I'm gonna die by a sword. If that Demon Prince lives, I'm probably gonna win. If it dies turn 1 to a cannon, then hey, look, I lost. But you have to go in with that mindset, right? Would you agree or disagree that that's a kind of key point to this as to building the SKU list?
I would say that's very important, specifically to a very gimmicky or skewed list. I would say if you try to build a more open or rounded list, it becomes less important. Like, for example, like the classic Empire list that has like, okay, I've got demigryphs, maybe a light council, maybe a Pope-mobile on top of that, a brick of halberdiers, and organ or not organ guns, what do I call it? Hellfire blow, the human organ gun. Can't remember. There you go. Totally escaped my mind. And a steam tank. Like they can kind of say, okay, well, we've got things to deal with most things. We've got solutions to a lot of problems. To me, that's more my style rather than like, oh, let's go pure chariots of warriors of chaos. So then you run into like a dwarven gun line or something, and they're like, well, I have problems. To me, I want to control variables. I don't like coin flips. So I think to me, that's why the value in a SKU list is not my style, but it's definitely a very valuable way of writing a list. There's nothing wrong with it. It's certainly efficient.
No, and I think when you not to call anyone out, but I think when you kind of start into Warhammer, you kind of lean towards a skill list when you just are getting into it. I mean, I know looking back at my old list, I was heavily into a skill list with Warriors as my first army back into Warhammer, as I was like, oh, I'm going to take this general. He's going to have a 1-up, 3-up ward save. He's going to always strike first with his 7 attacks, his strength 6. You know, he's going to murder everything. And he was the key point of my army. And as soon as my opponent was like, okay, here's a unit of chaff. Here's another unit of chaff. Oh, look, I redirect you for 5 turns of the game and you're too far away to do anything. Oh, I won because, you know, I was able to kill off everything else. And I was like, but my general. And now looking at my list, I've evolved into doing a very more reliable list. I mean, I think a good list that I've seen, and I hate to give this person credit, but you know, taking a warriors list, taking 3 units of warriors, which is something I've never seen, and 2 hell cannons, and having that flexibility and the understanding of this is a very all-comers army. As either if you're a shooting army, I can advance towards you, and if you're not a shooting army, and I don't think I can take you on head-to-head, I can castle. And originally, when I saw that list, I was like, "What are you doing, man? That's not warriors. There's no demon prince. There's no chimeras. And those juggernauts coming in very raw." And now understanding tactics and how to build a proper army list, I'm now looking at it and being like, wow, that's that's a very, very good tactical army. I mean, you might
Well, I
disagree
mean,
with it, but I mean, I think it was very, very well constructed.
well, I think it's constructed to achieve a goal, right? But at the end of the day, that goal is very general. Now, the problem with a list like that is that it does the same thing versus every army, right? Or it does, or it actually that's I'm saying the exact thing I meant not to say. It does something different depending on whatever it's facing. Now that's the nature of an all-comers list, you can say, but in my mind, I think the problem with that is that you kind of run into the risk of it's like, well, what happens if I run into something that's sort of half and half? Then I kind of have to roll the dice and say, okay, well, I can sort of compete with you on this front and maybe on that front, but when it comes down to it, I think an army list may run into problems if it's too general in that it can't achieve a specific goal. What's the expression? Jack of all trades, master of none. So, while that list is an interesting one, it does certainly have its problems. That's probably in the same plane as my Hydra list. With it might do well, but it's really, really dependent on what the opponent's playing and my ability to counteract that with my interesting choices in construction. So,
And just kind of as almost like a closing thoughts, do you think there is a right way to do this, or is it very you have to learn your meta, and you have to learn how you like to play armies and to build a list to kind of get a feel to how to build a list and how you need to construct a list, like personally versus everyone else?
well, that's kind of a personal question, right? Is that if you're playing in a very kind of like casual environment and like this sort of like, hey, I can take whatever the hell I want attitude is good, then that's good to you, right? If you're going to a tournament and expecting to win, but you're not taking what is, either agreed upon or what is, mathematically considered the best, then you have to be aware that there are deficiencies, right? It's kind of like, okay, well, I'm decent at basketball, saying, well, I can throw hoops with my friend and we can have fun shooting 21 or whatever. But then there may be the issue that if I say, hey, I want to try out for an NBA team, if I'm just playing horse with my friends, week in, week out, and may or may not have the mindset or the ability to actually compete with the upper tier. So it's really, you scale your needs to your environment, right? If you want to go to a grand tournament, then you better prepare for it. If you want to throw down dice with your buddies and just have a good time, then that's all you need to do, right? As long as you're having fun. So,
and I think that's a good lead into our next topic, which would be the objective of the list, being as a casual player versus a hyper competitive player that expects to go to GTs and tournaments and expects to win, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Now, I think as a lead in, it's kind of a very general thing. This is kind of a kind of quick thing where it's really just I'm designing a list. What is my environment in it? You say, hey, I want to play Warhammer. I'm like, all right, cool. I'll write a list up. Right. I'm like, okay, I got stuff near me. I'll just throw that in. That's a really casual list.
Yep.
Then somebody says, hey, there's a grand tournament in Ottawa in 2 months' time. Then I'll be like, okay, what's the comp style? And then I go design a list based on whatever the conditions are. That's another kind of thing. That's me building something specific to the goal of winning or competing well and or performing well in a tournament.
Yep.
Again, different environments, right? So it really comes down to your environment and your goal, and that will dictate how your list looks. I'm not going to take certain things that I wouldn't take in another environments. If I'm playing really, really casually, I might, play a Doom, a Screaming Bell, and versus an Empire list, but I'm not that worried about his, about winning or losing. I'm just saying, hey, look, I want to play some fun. I want to use a Screaming Bell because I think it's hilarious. The RNG nature of the thing makes me laugh. But then I realized that if he has one cannon, I'm very likely to lose the Grace here at the top of the turn. So, it's just something to keep in mind. The environment will dictate how your list looks, and again, you have to suit yourself to that environment. If you saying this word too much, if you're meta, to use a very lame word that doesn't really exist, in my opinion, if your environment, if your local scene, quote unquote, leans one way, then you got to play that way, right? If the
But
internet says
isn't
one
that
thing,
not meta right there? The scene that you do play in. I mean, I feel like that is the term of meta. I mean, before a couple of years back, no one had ever heard of chaff, and now it's very prevalent in our area, right?
well,
I
it's
mean,
very
I feel like
right.
that's meta.
To a degree, but I think the meta is this kind of nebulous term that a lot of people use in two different contexts, and they change it intermittently, like within the same sentence half the time. A meta can refer to universally, so like
Hmm.
dark elves are good in meta, but then you can say in our environment, beastmen have a 50% win rate because we have a few
Hmm.
players to play beastmen, and they do pretty well in our store. Um, Again, it's not always the case, or on a universal number. So the goal of something and the objective of something, the meta of something changes, right? If you have somebody that performs extraordinarily well with something that's considered less than optimal, is that breaking the meta, or is that just the local meta, right? Like, to me, that's why the word is misleading, because unless you have a very specific definition for what you mean, it can kind of be applied in different circumstances, which makes it less useful.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, good point. And but I think back to our point of objective building of a list is either the fluff or what have you, but also for tournaments. And I know a lot of tournaments around here are very highly embracing ETC comp. And I
Yeah,
know
they
me
seem
and
to
you
take.
have very different views on ETC and the other comps that are out there right now.
Yeah, I'm just yeah, I guess to speak on this, the point specifically is that our areas seem to be taking a lot of their cues from a lot of the American tournaments, and how the American tournaments, over the last few years have moved. ETC has become the thing, the staple for it, staple for a tournament, and that's an interesting shift. And I may or may not like it, but I have to understand the environment that I exist in. So that's just where I am currently, regardless of my own opinions. That's just the nature of where we are.
Yeah. Based on that, besides ETC and Swedish, do you know of any other comp styles that are out there that people may have or may not have experienced?
Well, those are the two big ones, really. But in terms, it comes down to what I can think. Comp can be as simple as, hey, no special characters, and you go from there. Comp can be, yeah, let's cap the magic phase at 10 dice and only 4 dice per casting attempt or whatever, right? Like, comp could
Yeah.
be anything from like a casual agreement between you and your opponents, or to something that's really formal and specific and like formulaic, like ETC or Swedish. When it comes down to it, that comp is just a network to sort of change the game in a way that the creators intended, right? So the comp package is trying to curb something. In the special characters example, it's some of the special characters tend to move the game in a way that's normally not allowed. Like, you take what's the Everqueen's name, Alariel there, and then
Valerio.
she really buffs up the unit that she's in, and she's really extremely powerful. Some people may think, well, that's kind of cheesy. If you have Alariel and I have Skillia Angerfilm there, and I've got a spawn that just has moved 3d6. Like, why is how is that equitable in terms of special characters? So you just crossed them all out. But when it comes down to it, different kinds of comp are just basically that. They're just different ways of changing the game towards the intended direction, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, as someone that's played ETC a lot, preparing for an ETC tournament, I know we have similar but differentiating views on comp. What do you think of comp? Do you think it's necessary for Warhammer, or is it just an unnecessary thing that most players don't need to worry about?
Well, most players, like any sort of casual player that just wants to have fun with their friends, won't need to worry about it at all. It'll go this conversation will go right over their heads, and for good reason. But in a tournament environment, comp is a interesting beast, in my opinion. I think the goal is a good one to sort of move Warhammer in a competitive direction, make it more like the Olympics, where everything's got standardized rules and whatever. I mean, whatever your opinion on organized sports is, it goes from there. Pick your favorite sport. It's got one rule book. You go that direction. Everything's got a playbook, and everybody kind of competes along these lines. Obviously, it changes when I have different kinds of, I've got a rule book that's different from yours, and we kind of play in the same environment. But comp is a good goal. I just think the execution is kind of wonky in some places. Staying on the ETC topic, I think again the construction of ETC it's a great thing. It's actually a good mental exercise, but it's not my cup of tea in terms of things. It's because okay, I'd like to do the best I possibly can in a tournament. Now you design a list for your army and you go compete in a tournament. The comp style doesn't change that what you're doing there. It just changes how you do it. So if I'm going to an uncomp tournament and I'm taking Hiles, for example, continuing on the Everqueen example, I'm like, okay, she's really good. So throw her in a unit, and then I'll make that unit as big as possible. And then you just build the army around that, right? And then you go to a tournament that's exactly uncomp to Warhammer, except it doesn't allow special characters. You're like, well, crap, I can't do what I just did before. So I'll do the same thing, except I'll just throw a Shadow Wizard in there with a Book of Hoth to kind of replicate what she does. And they'll still throw all the regular gear, like the Banner of the World Dragon. They'll throw everything I possibly can to make it as close as possible. And then you move another step further where it says you can only take units of X size or whatever your chosen modifiers are. Comp is a good thing. It's just wonkily done because at the end of the day, I'm still writing the best list I can. It just changes how I do that. So in Swedish, I want to make sure that I can get enough points for the comp score while not giving up too many points into rock hard with the way the numbers work and that sort of thing. We can get into specifics of it later, but in a rough kind of sense, Swedish composition lets you take basically whatever it is you want out of your book, but everything's given a numeric value. And some things that are considered better have a higher value. Now, basically the better your list is in a kind of vacuum environment, the lower your score is going to be. You get a more negative modifiers. So if I run a list that's like a 0 or a 1, that's like a hyper competitive list. But the way the system balances that is if I'm playing somebody that's like a 10 or an 11, I'm giving up 1,100 points before the game starts. So that means that my really rock hard competitive list has to make up a deficiency of 1,100 points to win. Now that's the ETC system, and that lets you take whatever, or Swedish, so it's Swedish. ETC does it differently. It says you have a certain amount of choices, options in the main rule book and your army book cost X amount of choices, and you only have 5 selections to go for them. Again, it's a different way of doing it. I'm not gonna say, hey, I can take whatever I want. I'm gonna design the best list under those parameters I can. So I think comp is a noble goal. I just think execution wise, it's less than optimal.
I agree with you. I mean, if you look at Swedish comp, I don't know if you've listened to any of the podcasts that the Swedish comp guys have done, or if you've read the forums and stuff that have been put out specifically by the Swedish comp people. But they have very clearly said that the purpose of Swedish was not to be like hyper competitive, but was to encourage people to use the choices that they don't normally see, such as like a Loden Sky Cutter or a Screaming Bell, right? And I mean ETC does something similar, but it was more designed competitively, I think. I mean, when you start looking at how they comp cannons.
I see ETC as kind of a Swedish is I want you to take stuff that you don't normally take.
Yep.
I think ETC is the other way around. I think I don't want you to take these things that you see all the time. And you can think it's a subtle distinction, but I think it's an important one. Like,
I see your point, but at the same time, I think it's slightly misguided. I mean, you look at what ETC comps, and it comps what's hard in every single list. Granted, I think they've gone overboard with certain armies, and they've very undercomped certain armies, but I'm not sure. I mean, can you just give a bit more in-depth idea?
Yeah, certainly. So, like I said before, ETC prohibits you from doing stuff. I can only take 5 choices. Like for using my Warriors of Chaos example, I take a Hell Cannon, that is one of my 5 choices. I take a second Hell Cannon, that is 3 choices. I take any kind of death magic, that is an addition. I think I'm actually illegally at that point. I think it actually costs 6 of my 5 choices. I'm not specific on it because I don't follow too well, but it's basically the same general idea. A combination of X things eats up my entire pool. Now, there are certain things like taking a Demon Prince with a 1+ armor save is a composition point. Taking more than 1 unit of Juggernauts is a composition point. And things along these lines. That is a negative reinforcement. That is saying you cannot do this. Swedish, the other way around, is positive. It says you can take this, but be prepared to pay the consequences. I can take a Death Wizard, a Death Prince with level 5 and wings and 1+ armor and a Charm Shield and whatever other gear I want to give him. I just have to be prepared to take the negative 7,000 modifier, whatever it comes out to. That's exaggeration, but you know what I mean. So Swedish to me is a positive system. I don't mean positive as in like good. I mean positive as in like positive and negative law. Positive as in you're allowed to do things. This is what you can do. Swedish is yes, you can do this. ETC is no, you can't. At least that's my understanding of it, right? And again, you can disagree with that all you want, but just my understanding of it is that, like Swedish, they say, yeah, take what you want, but just be aware that you're going to get a lot of points docked for that. You can
No,
still do it.
I agree with that way of thought. I mean, Swedish is definitely. I mean, if you want to bring a hyper competitive army, hey, you're gonna pay the price for it. Versus ETC, which is like, oh, you want to bring whatever army, cool, but here's restrictions regardless of what your other choices may be. I mean, I think ogres are a prime example where a slaughter master, which is a character that you have to take another magical user just to be able to use the slaughter master effective, in my opinion, is a comp point.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? I mean,
Well, it's the same for
no.
demons. It's like demons to me. I've never understood was it's taking a single greater demon, regardless of its type, costs you a comp point. That also, but if you think about that, that's kind of like in my mind, it's a little ridiculous because you think, okay, so why aren't level 4s cast or comped in every other army? Why is the Supreme Sorceress not a point? If a Demon Prince is a Demon Prince costs twice as much before I give him a single upgrade, and that's not even the big demons. If I take a Lord of Change and make it level 4, I'm still flying a level 4. It's actually a level 4 that's cannonable, like extremely cannonable. It's very vulnerable to stuff. It also demons also has very limited spell selections and lore selections because my army is constructed in such a way that my units have to work together way more than regular armies do because of the demonic warfare thing. Like a Tzeentch general does not give inspiring presence to a core choice. Bloodletters don't listen to greater demons or Lords of Change apparently. But just taking that Lord of Change nets me a point. It's the same thing with a
Yeah.
Slaughter Master. Why is that the case? To me, I don't understand that. Maybe they have a good reason for it in their environment, and it just kind of filtered down across the world at this point. But to me, that's kind of a faulty point in logic because if you talk to most people in like a general sense, magic is a cornerstone of the game. If you do not run magic, you are really hamstringing yourself against somebody who does. Magic is too powerful to ignore. Even just taking a level 4, never casting a spell, but just using it purely for the defense is an important thing. But just taking something that gives me the opportunity to pay an exorbitant amount of points for something is a comp point. That's the problem I have with the system, is that it's a good intention, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense because it's, hey, you can't do that, but everybody else gets the same privilege without the penalty, right? It's awkward to me.
Yeah, I definitely agree. As someone that plays demons pretty regularly, I don't understand the reasoning. I mean, with not being able to take anything other than a greater demon or a demon prince, why are we hamstrung like that? I mean, if I could take like a Herald of Tzeentch on foot, sure, definitely, no problem. But because the book is written and I'm hamstrung like that, I have to, and it's a comp point just to do that. It's like, well, that doesn't seem fair. I mean, as you point out, Shadow is ridiculously good, but I mean, I want to take a Demon Prince and I want to mark him to Nurgle to make him useful. I can't take Shadow anymore. I'm still paying a comp point for it, and not really fair.
Well, I guess fair at the end of the day, it's really the creators had a specific vision in mind, and they wrote it based on that. Um, See, to me, that's the sort of reason why comp is a cool idea, but hasn't been discovered in its perfect form yet. Its platonic ideal is still to be discovered. Um, to me, you're not. I'm still writing the best list I can. The difference is I write the best ETC list or Swedish list I can. It doesn't change the fact that I'm still doing the task of writing what I consider the best list. It just changes how I do it, right? The variables change, but the goal is the same. The
Hmm.
experiment is still, I want a good, rock solid list. Okay, so if it's too expensive composition wise to take what is normally good in an uncommon environment, taking this is now the best option, right? If taking two hell cannons like that list we were talking about before, and death magic is in an illegal ETC list,
Yep.
then I don't do that. You take only the two hell cannons, or only the death wizard, or only one hell cannon and a death wizard, or whatever the points work out to be. Um, that's the reasoning behind that in my mind. That's the behind my decision as to like composition being wonkily executed.
Hmm.
Um, that's to me that again that's the reason why like if I had to make a judgment a value judgment, I like Swedish over ETC because the freedom is still there. I like the positive saying if you can take this, just be prepared to pay the cost, rather than the no, you can't do that. You can't do that at all. Um, to me, it's just too restrictive. And I'm not even American, so the whole freedom thing isn't really part of the culture here. Just so just the culture, the back and forth is just funny for that.
Hmm.
But yeah, I guess in terms of composition, that's my take on it.
Hmm. Do you feel that composition kind of affects the different army rankings, or not really?
Well, the army rankings, I guess to speak to that generally, armies obviously can be ranked. You know, you can do it numerically. You can just kind of do it generally. In a general sense, yeah, it definitely changes things. Certain comps favor certain armies better. Like if, for example, in a vacuum, which you say of 15 armies, if demons in an unconquered environment are ranked, let's say a 7 or an 8, just hypothetically, the fact that they're paying points for cannons, which everybody else gets the privilege of just taking, the fact that they're paying points for level 4, which everybody else gets just the privilege of taking, except for ogres, I guess. Then you gotta drop them down the list because other people can do the same things without the comp points, but they can take other things which are considered comp, right? Like a Gracier isn't a comp point, but the Storm Banner, the Hell Pit, all these sort of things, all the shit Skaven shenanigans are still possible, but you just take one of them instead of two of them. But in the demon list, as far as I remember correctly, I don't have it open in front of me. A Skull Cannon is one comp point. I've thought out of 5. If I take a second one, it's 3. So I'm with the 4 choices already. So then I have 1 point left for my level 4. That means I can take no other stuff that is considered a comp point. So things that are considered good are like Beast and Nurgle, things like that. So that means I'm immediately unable to take stuff like that up to a certain, whatever the limitations are, just by virtue of playing demons.
Dude,
So
I want you to write the next EDC comp, as that would make demons viable. Unfortunately, one skull cannon, just one cannon, when dwarves aren't hamstrung at all, is 2 comp points. You
I
want to
thought
take
it was
2?
1.
It's 3. So that is your entire comp point right there, all 5. You don't even get a level 4 caster. You know what you get? You get a level 2 if you decide to take Siege.
Otherwise, level 1s. Yeah.
Otherwise, level 1s.
Yeah. See, to me, that's kind of the faulty logic in it behind it. It's kind of like, well, why do the Empire and dwarves they don't pay any comp points? Like I believe the dwarves it's 5 war machines. I think that's all they
They get
get.
5 war machines.
But in theory, think about it. If you wanted to, 3 cannons and 2 grudge, or 3 cannons and 2 organ guns. That's 5 war machines. That's incredibly effective. Why is that? Like that's a comp restriction. That's just what a regular dwarf is, unless you want to go really insanely heavy or a really huge game. So to me, that's a fault in logic. And I drop half the stuff on my desk. Awesome. But see, to me, that's again, as a demon player, you're playing for the privilege of taking things that other people are entitled to get. So it's interestingly designed, right? The ogres get hit in the same kind of fashion. Why is a slaughter master? If you make even granted, put the demons aside. You can say, well, you're getting a wizard that's a monster that can thunderstomp, that can crush a unit in combat. Okay, forget it. That's true. I'll put that aside. A Slaughtermaster is good in combat, but it's still like weapon skill 4, initiative 2 or 3, maybe. It's not going to eat a unit on its own. But again, that's a comp point just by taking a level 4. And on top of that, a Slaughtermaster has to take a secondary wizard just to have choice in lores. And even when it has choice, it doesn't have that many choices. What is it? Death, Heavens,
and Shadow.
And Shadow, that's it, right? I mean, those are good lores, but you only have 4, right? So if you want choice, or like the elves and Empire have 8+ choices.
Actually, I might have lied. It's actually Beast, not Shadow. Sorry.
Either way, it's still, its point still remains. It's still 3 plus the Lord of the Great Maw. So again, it's interesting, but it's true. Like, I guess there's maybe logic, and maybe if I was speaking to the creators, they could explain that to me as to why one level 4 wizard is 1 comp point when everybody but a battle wizard lord of the Empire isn't that. When like a light council isn't comp, I don't think. So just taking a crap ton of baby wizards and a big wizard all in the same lore that have a great amount of synergy with the Arch-Lector on a Pope-mobile. And I don't think that's, if it's comp, it's not 5 points. It's not, I don't think it'd even be 3 at that at all. Maybe you can tell me, but it's 1 comp point for that. So a council of wizards, a cavalcade, a choir of wizards singing the praises of the Lord of Light is 1 point. But just taking 1 level 4 is 1 point. To me, that don't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
No. Or again, right? ETC also comps the magic phase in general, where you can only cast 5 dice, but then it also comps wizards. So by comping, to me, like comping magic would be a way to comp wizards, but then you do both. But then dwarves can still take 3 spell eaters if they want. Again, that's not a problem.
They take 3 in there, 2 dispel scrolls if they want.
They can take 5. Wow, geez. Well.
Yeah, they can take 4 or 5. So it's just down 4 phases of magic, which is ridiculous. And that's not comp.
That's true. Yeah. See, to me, again, that's the sort of thing. So back to your original question, which was army rankings. Yes, it definitely does change things. Like in my mind, I've always considered the Empire one of the best books. Again, I don't know. I don't normally, numerically rank things, but if I had to, I'd say, it's easily top 5, just because of the sheer versatility of the book.
Yep.
And because of the uncomped or the comp environment, and because they're not touched that hard or they're not as affected by it as other books, I'd say they that pushes them either higher or makes them where they are. Obviously, elves are just like that as well, because they can do they have a lot of magical horsepower with very little, required effort. But when it comes down to it, I think that's the nature of comp, is that it changes things for a direction. It pushes things in a direction. It doesn't necessarily actually follow through 100%. At least that's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And just touching on that, what would you say is, I guess, the top, I guess the best armies, if we want to go with the 15, GW armies, what would you say, I guess, would be the top 5? Right, if we break it into categories, so like top, middle, lower, what would you say is the top 5, in your opinion?
You do yours first.
Well, I'd have to say, I think Dark Elves would definitely have to be up there. I mean, they're an absolutely great army. And I think followed really closely behind them would also have to be the High Elves. I mean, they can make some really nasty lists with Frost Hearts and Dragons and White Lions. I'm with you. Empire definitely up there. As I think Skaven are also up there. I mean, they just have so many tools, and even when their tools don't work, they can fall back upon stubborn 10 units all day. And Warriors. I think Warriors still have really nasty lists. The Demon Prince is still scary. Juggernauts, Warriors, Throg with his troll hordes, that's all frightening. I mean, I'd be afraid to fight any of it. What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of agree with the sentiment as to the top armies. Again, if I hate numeric lists because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But if I had to give you a grouping, the High and Dark Elves are definitely up there. Empire's up there. Dwarves are up there. Dwarves in a vacuum. They have problems in execution because tactics counter them, but in a vacuum they're fine, I think. or they're great book. If you go flip to the bottom, I think there are books that obviously struggle a little bit.
Definitely.
Um, See, like to me, I know a lot of people don't, but like Bretonia, for example, to me is like a book that struggles because to me there's like really only a few really effective builds, and even those are contingent on one or two things happening. If you're doing the Paladin wall, you need Savage to go off. You need that desperately, right? You need your characters to hit, and you need to get the charge in. You need to get the right charge, and you have the right weight of force. You need to have the right amount of dice to get the spells you need, and you need to hit like a truck. And if the
Yep.
guy's stubborn, you lost, right?
Yep.
Other armies like Beastmen, they just need a lot of work at this point. Um, so in terms of like the bottom tiers, because the Tomb Kings again need a lot of work, right? They can be, they can catch you off guard with, like chariots and snake riders and all this other stuff, and like, and they have a great magic phase, but then they tend to crumble in other ways.
And just to be clear, before we continue, I
Goblins
think
just
say that we're not talking about the Undead Legions list or Warrior Legion list. We're talking about just army books specifically, because I know in Undead Legions and the Warrior
hold on
list
for a
that
second.
changes
Hold on for a second.
everything. Yep.
Hold on for a second. Just you just keep spitballing. I just gotta go get the phone.
Cool.
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy. So yeah, like I was saying, the end times books change all this dramatically. It kind of skews it. I mean, I know Tomb Kings become very prevalent in the Undead Legions list, whereas Vampire Counts take a backseat versus when you look at the army books one against the other, Vampire Counts are way ahead of the Tomb Kings. Are you back?
Yep, and I definitely agree with that sentiment. The certain armies, even if they play somewhat similar, do have different, diverging destinies, I guess you can say. When it comes down to it, the goal of it are the quality of the writing of the army book or the age of the army book do have a factor in its success as well. Bretonia it's a really cool army thematically. It's great. My vampire counts, if they ever get off the ground, would be it's basically a Musulian army, but the book plays one way effectively, really, in my mind. You can do fun things in other ways, but really when it comes down to it, if you want to succeed with it, there's only a couple variations on one idea, which is drive home with a few lances and as many characters and savage beasts as you can get, and then go from there.
Don't forget the Peggies.
Pegasus Knights too, or then you can kind of go yay or nay on one trebuchet, two trebuchets, or whatever. But when it comes down to it, to me, the goal is always usually the same. It's get your lances into a few priority targets and pray to God that you kill it and overrun it, and don't die to war machines or shooting or to Searing Doom or whatever, or
But
to Weight
also
Watchers.
on that topic, I mean, actually, great ending note is the age of the book doesn't matter as to how good it is. I mean, I think another army that really struggles nowadays is Wood Elves, and they're the newest army book. But just because of the way they play, they're in a very interesting spot. I mean, yes, they can win, but they cannot ever get a big win.
Well,
I
I
don't
guess
know
yeah,
if you disagree with that.
that's true. But again, by the same token, we also both rank dwarves very highly. And if you're playing a competitive setting and somebody plays the standard like Dwarf Castle, you just hide on the other side of the board for 6 turns and you say, okay, we're both going to draw this game because nobody's going to lose anything. So play style is one thing, but
But
it
I
also
mean, dwarves have the option to reach out and touch you from across the board.
yeah, but again,
They
it's
have their
also
cannons. They have
low
their grudge
range.
swords.
But
Grudge
also
swords are
the thing with
16 inches.
yeah, they are. But you're also counting on scatter dice and artillery dice playing nice and hitting and killing targets and doing it properly. So like again, if somebody just wants to not play the dwarf game and just hide out for 6 turns, they can do it. It's the same thing with Wood Elves, right? Wood Elves struggle because of the nature of their army. They're very guerrilla warfare. The death by 1,000 cuts.
Yep.
They don't have a center block usually to hit things. They have wild riders, chew small, depleted units up once they're finally been pinpricked by enough, true flights. But really, when it comes down to it, they don't want to have like a center block to like run into. They don't have like a white lion brick or something, or a halberdier centerpiece. It's small little nimble people that run around in corners and pray to God you don't catch them. The dwarves don't move. To me that's the difference. Is that the Wood Elves, it's a stylistic choice. You sort of can do a combat block, I guess, if you choose to do like a bunch of hammers or, pick a dwarf unit with great weapons, which, to me is infinitely boring because every dwarf does the same thing, sits there and sits there in great weapons. That's it. But you can say that, okay, the dwarves can fight if they want, but they're too slow. They don't have the anvil to move anymore. The old book. They can vanguard with strollers or whatever it is, but again, if they're really running advanced with their guns, it's hard to keep advanced. Plus, they're so slow that it's really hard to guarantee that any kind of meaningful combat will break up before the end of the game. So if you want the dwarves, they're really a solid book, but tactics will always allow you to say, okay, I'm just going to hide in the other corner. And then the dwarves can't do anything. Cannons will only do so much. They'll kill a rank of guys, right? If they're stupid, if there's a monster that can kill a thing, especially in comped environments where like hills, protect things from cannons, then the dwarves literally can't do anything. So another thing to keep in mind when discussing lists is one of the reasons I don't like ranks. It's because the variables always change. If I have to run towards you as warriors or something, then yeah, the dwarves are going to do well because I have to funnel into your guns. But if we're doing the Empire gunline thing versus the dwarf gunline thing, then then you get steam tanks and all this sort of stuff, and the variables change completely. So and then are we playing in ETC? Are we playing in Swedish? What are we doing, right? Like to me the variables are always too different. So like army rankings change. So like Wood Elves I think are very good book, but the nature of them make it so different that they like their nature is so different compared to the standard army, which is usually like a horde of something and like supporting somethings. They're small little units of little like assassin type things, like pinpricks from a mile away, are different, right? So it's not necessarily worse. It's just different design, and unfortunately, that design is less effective than the standard sit there and run at you thing, or sit there and shoot at you. So that changes the nature of how the ranking system will kick in as well.
And I think just to give a little bit of love to the Worlds, because I know they've been really hammered hard by people. I think one of the reasons that they're looked so down upon is because when the books came out, it was the High Elves, Dark Elves, and Wood Elves, and everyone looked at the Wood Elves and expected them to play exactly like the High Elves and Dark Elves, and that's not how Wood Elves were designed to play. They're designed to be a guerrilla army. They're not designed to have their hammer of executioners or white lions with the banner of the World Dragon, right? They're designed to be a very guerrilla army that are designed to dance around, and once you've been pinpricked forever with their Glade Guard, the Wild Riders charge home and destroy whatever they're going to hit.
Yep, and that's the nature of the thing. To me, that's one of the reasons why the book is so cool, is because you get the kind of flexibility of saying, okay, I get this army that's kind of like a soft center 90% of the time, except they do it. The lists I have in my head a lot of the times are soft everything, left flank, right flank, center block, all of it's completely fluid. It's the best of its ability. And then you really are doing the runaround game, and I think that's one of the reasons why people badmouth it sometimes, or they're dissatisfied with the book, is because of the whole. It can be annoying, right? It's like, well, I can never catch these damn elves. What am I supposed to do with this? And, it's like it's cowardly. You can say, like, "I'll fight me like a man" or whatever. It's just they're just fighting you like elves. They're fighting you the way they want. They don't want to fight you. That'd be stupid of them. They're gonna shoot you with a bow when they have. Why wouldn't they?
And I think that's a good point for list construction, as every book has their thing that they do. I mean, dwarves shoot, warriors march forward and fight you, Wood Elves dance around, and you can't ding an army. I mean, if you look online, you see people saying, "Oh, ogres suck," or "What else suck," or even if high elves suck. You can't let that deter you. I mean, every army does what they do, and people will whine and complain about every army. But when you build an army list, you have to be willing to stick to it and just do your thing. I mean, you win, lose, whatever. Have fun and play the game.
So I think that's the thing we were speaking about earlier, is that the goal of an army list is that if it's specific enough, then you kind of you stick to that goal, and you'll know that, okay, I'm in a good position here, or I'm struggling here. If it's general enough, you can kind of say, well, I might be in trouble in this sort of spot, but I'll be good in this area, right? And you can kind of go from there. But the book just showcases different ways of doing the exact of achieving that goal. And on the topic of composition, it's just a different way of constructing that list that has that goal, right? So Really, when it comes down to it, it's your army, and you do it how you want based on your parameters. Just being aware that the composition changes the balance of power, right? If the for me the Empire will always be or have always been a top tier army. Do I think that they're outshone by other books because they have some really flashy toys in a lot of ways? Yeah, maybe. But again, that doesn't necessarily say that anybody else is 100% better 100% of the time.
Hmm.
It's just up in the air, right? It's always dice. I think it's just a game of dice at the end of the day. So even if you have what is considered the ultimate list, you can get rocked because your dice are not friendly with you today, right? Everybody's failed that cold-blooded leadership 10 with a reroll, right? Everybody's had that experience where I need to roll 4 dice, and the total of those 4 dice needs to be like 10, and I have like a +4 modifier, and somehow I whiff it, or I need to roll 3 dice and total like a 6, and I roll triple ones and fail flank charge and juggernauts. It's literally dice can be your friends, and sometimes it can't be. So, at the end of the day, there's a lot of variables in this game. List building is one that you can sort of control, and yeah, and your basic composition just changes on how you control it. Changes what you're looking for. Changes what you're aiming for, really. So, at the end of the day, it's composition is comp, and your local meta is your local meta, and your plan of designing an army is yours. It can work. You can beat your own drum and march to your own tune or whatever stupid expression I seem to be mangling right now. But it's just that's it. It's just you do what works for you, and there is no right answer, right? You can talk about optimization, but really, really when it comes down to it, I don't think there is a true answer, right? There'll always be more popular ones, but are they popular because it's more accessible, it's easier to do the good thing, or is it because they have something intrinsically popular or intrinsically appealing to more people? Are high elves really, really that good? Or are they, some of the people at our friendly local game store have problems with high elves? They can never get it to work, regardless of how good people say frost arcs are, or regardless of how good people say the silver helm, Death Star with 18 princes in it and a pear tree. There's always problems there, right? It's you find what works for you and you go with that.
Yep. And just to continue on that conversation we were having before, and I know you don't like ranking, but I think we've given 4 books that really struggle. What would you say the fifth one would be? And after that, we I think can very obviously say what the 5 middle armies would be.
Okay, so what's can't remember. I'm really long-winded, so I forgot. So I said Tomb Kings, Orcs and Goblins.
We didn't say Orcs and Goblins.
I think I mentioned them, and then I just got out. I wouldn't picked up the phone. So I think okay. So let me just go again. Tomb Kings struggle because they're just worst version of vampire counts. Worst core, not as much support. Really bank on magic. Magic can swing it for them, but have a hard time. They can surprise with fast things, but it's harder to do it. Bretonia really needs opportunity dice rolls and the lady to be on their side, and are just outshone by the Empire in every way possible. Okay, let's see here. Ogres. Let's see here. Ogres. I think they struggle because of the early nature of their army book. They were one of the first in 8th, and so the changes were kind of timid, right? They're going to take so many casualties that really the only way to do it is the Gut Star, and the Gut Star kind of is outshone by scarier Death Stars now. So it's 3. Let's see here. In a comped environment, especially ETC, I might even rank demons as low as 5th because of just the not only the random nature of the demon codex itself and the really restrictive nature of their rules, but just the sheer amount of shit that the comp packages tend to dump on them, right? The you can't take a level 4 without paying a point. You can't take cannons, period. You can't take a scroll that's not comps, but that's just demons. You can't choose gifts that you want to buy except for a sword. You can literally only buy specific swords, and you're overpaying for them half the time, it seems like. Or the rest of it is RNG luck, right? Am I hoping for the 2+ armor save, and then I get the 2+ armor save, and the guy's got a metal wizard? I'm like, well, crap. You can't guarantee anything in the demon book half the time. And that book, you have to have synergy. Like Juggernauts or Blood Crushers are inherently worse than Skull Crushers. but they almost cost the same. I think it's like 10 points difference or 13 points difference, something like that. That's not enough to warrant the, the sheer lack of power compared to the two. Then there's always the randomness of the demon book. The Reign of Chaos table is the most hilarious thing in the universe. I love it personally. It's so thematic, but there's everybody said that time where it's like, oh, I'm winning this combat, and then I roll the snake eyes for the the Reign of Chaos table, and all my things have to take a leadership test or a instability test, and I just started losing blood letters in my monocorn army. And then I guess that's Corn being mad at me for just running monocorn. He's like, even he acknowledges that it's a problem, but I think that's the thing, right? Is that books change based on the composition. So in a comp environment, especially ETC, I might even rank demons in the bottom. So I think again, me being long-winded, Tomb Kings, uh, ogres, Bretonia, demons, Beastmen. Obviously, Beastmen they just struggle because it's an ancient book and they haven't had the love they need. So I think that's kind of they're automatically relegated to the fifth, but they may not be there. So other books, maybe you can compete up and down. Like Orcs and Golems can be really scary, but again, it's really random too. Skaven can be really fucking hilariously bad if the army book decides to shit on itself. Um, like if all my hell pit rolls triples in the first turn and decides to crap on itself or whatever, or my doom wheel shoots my hell cannon or my whatever, right? It shoots my rat darts and the rat dart flees and panics through something, even though it's on leadership 10 with a reroll. And, like it's this gaming book is supposed to be this hilarious mishmash of like Dr. Seuss gone crazy, but it can be effective, but it's RNG based, right? Does that put it in the bottom? Not necessarily, but you can say that it's uncontrollable. It's not as reliable as elves are, which can reroll everything positively. So, when it comes down to it, to me, that's why I don't like ranking, because I can always find an excuse for why somebody's good or and bad. I'm bad at this. Probably should have invited somebody else.
Yeah, you're fine. I think you've made a very good point on comp or meta can change it, but going back to it, I think we're talking uncomped and just in general. And I disagree with your rankings. I think we can all agree though that Beastmen are unfortunately down there at the bottom because they're such an old book and they were written back in a day when GW was really overpricing monsters and they hadn't really thought about hordes and everything. Bretonia struggle, as you said, because you're putting all your eggs in probably about 3 baskets, which is your 3 night buses, and you're hoping that you can get Savage Beasts off, and your Paladin Wall can do stuff, and your Peggy Knights and Trebuchets will do their work. But it's not exactly the greatest strategy when you're paying 55 points per piece of chaff, and you have to take 3 of them. That's it gets a little scary. Tomb Kings, I agree with you that they struggle. They rely heavily, heavily on the magic phase, and they can have a real. I think they can have the best magic phase in the game based upon the amount of wizards they will take and the casket, which is absolutely terrifying when it gives you D3 power dice like the Hearthstone. But unlike the Hearthstone, you don't have to have your wizards clutched beside this thing, and it also has some pretty cool bounce spells. But I think where we differ, where we have a bit of difference is I think in an uncomped environment, just based upon how the army books look in general, wood elves are definitely down there because if you can beat wood elves. I mean, if your opponent makes a mistake, the army falls apart. If you have shooting, or at least a lot of shooting, the army falls apart. If you take magic missiles, you can usually put the wood elves in their place and they really struggle when all they have is their strength 3 bows, even though they're unpiercing to do work. I mean, if you have few to no war machines, and that's not a dwarf army which relies upon it, the army can still function. Another army that I think needs to be down there is ogres. Like you said, their heyday was at the beginning of this edition, and they did the Gut Star really, really well. But as you said, nowadays there are better Death Stars, and the ogres just don't have the toughness to survive nowadays. And being an army that relies on their toughness 4 and no armor it hurts them really badly.
Well, I mean, we're kind of treading the same ground here, right? I spent demons specifically in a comped environment because I just get murdered. But
Hey,
what
my
else?
demons
Again,
work. Don't bash Slanesh. Slanesh works in an uncomped environment.
well, that's the only way to do it. And again, you also get murdered by one cannonball and you just die. So
Shut up.
but yeah, the to me the so again, like again, I really hate ranking things because arbitrary numbers are a great way to really make your society an entire binary system. But it's numerics. It's the Futurama bureaucracy thing. But when it comes down to it, to me, at least what elves? They're still elves. At the end of the day, they get rerolls for everything. They have access to more stuff, right? Like to me, what elves won't be at the bottom, right? Maybe middle may not be. They may never crack the top tier. Maybe stuck at the bottom of the middle, but they're still there. They don't have the same glaring problems that the dear God, what do they call Tomb Kings have or the Beastmen have.
Hmm.
They're just they play differently, right? And they can be. At the end of the day, they're still elves. They still have access to so much crazy stuff. Their proficiency and things, and their good units are really good, whereas like Tomb King good units are only mediocre. I think that's the distinction in my mind, right? The
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you totally. I mean, if you're not going to put Wood Elves at the bottom, they are definitely middle rank. Like you said, they're not going to crack the top rank, but I mean, they'll definitely fall to the middle rank armies like vampire counts, which don't care about how many guys you kill with their thousands of zombies. I mean, orcs and goblins can put force the troll hordes and the savage hordes or the black orc hordes, and I mean that's pretty scary. I mean, the whole army doesn't care about ballistic skill shooting with their doom divers and rock lavas. Demons, I think they're middle tier that will beat what else. I mean, demons are they're just such a good army. I mean, the Reign of Chaos table can win you a game. Yes, it can also probably lose you a game, but I mean, whatever. You have to go in understanding that. But I mean, an army that comes with a ward save, they don't care about psychology. And demons do have some hard hitting units. I mean, just even if you were to take two bloodthirsters and no level 4, that's still kind of scary. I mean, orcs and goblins do it's similar, except demons don't have to worry about the animosity table. I mean, both armies have the similar aspect of we have Killy core, and if you can't stop that Killy core, it will mess you up.
well, I would amend that statement as to chaos has grindy core because they can take. Well, if they put it's really funny to pick your poisons. Really, you have plague bearers, which in my opinion take too damn long to kill anything, so they're not an efficient like combat unit. They're just there to grind. You have beasts, which do well. They do better, but generally in a comped environment, they're comped to shit. In an uncomped environment, you're fine. But yeah, again, if you want to play nothing but pure beast and Urgle, you're the to me, it speaks to your character. But and then you look at Slanesh, and you're like, oh, again, it's the elf thing. It's lots of strength, 3 armor piercing. But then you go Shadow. Well, Shadow makes everybody good. You turn basically anything except zombies without a leadership modifier into a combat unit, which just because Occam's is so good and the rest of Shadow's so good, except for the damn cannonball. But to me, that's just the nature of the book. And also, like, the book is just so full of like random stuff, like like I'm punished for taking different gods as my army, right? If I do monocorn, then sure, I don't have any wizards, but at least everybody listens to everybody else. I can use my general's leadership as opposed to like if I take plague bearers and I want to take metal, then I can't get a inspiring presence is a useless rule to me. Um, so I don't know. Like to me, it's there's too much. The variability there is even worse. And to me, vampire accounts, the only thing they struggle with really is if that HQ gets killed, basically that's it. And you can protect it, I guess, easily enough. But they live and die like the Demon Prince. The Vampire Lord dies, they lose. So
Hmm. I think this would be a good chance to kind of just explain how comp affects it. I mean, why don't you give us your uncomp dark elf list or even a warrior list that you would typically run, and I'll give you a comp list with the ETC scale.
you go first. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. All right, why don't you pick dark elves or warriors? Okay, I guess I'm deciding. So let's do warriors. My typical uncomped warrior list, we're gonna have a demon prince with all the kit you would expect: one up, flaming, hits on twos, regolds his wounds, five spells. Probably gonna have the unkillable BSB either on a disc or a demonic mount. We'll have a sorcerer, probably either with the skull of Katam in the back of the board, smelling crack to get paradise, or he'll be in a unit. We'll probably have six chariots, maybe with a unit of two marauders just to for fortitude. A chimera too, and we'll have probably two units of three or four skull crushers.
Yeah, I guess that's a fairly solid list at the end of the day and sort of pseudo environment. I'm just again, me, I like static things I can rely on. So the chariots are fantastic units to me, but like not as the basis for your army. Um, Chaos chariots are just so damn good, but if you run into something that you can't grind out, or they will outgrind you, or the guy's got decent enough shooting, or more chaff than you can deal with, it's just too hard, man. And then you tend to railroad yourself because the chariots will run into each other to get this parking lot effect. So, yeah, I don't know. It's not my style.
Yeah. Well, and then let's look at the ETC comp for that. For like my warriors list. I have my demon prince. He knows five spells, and congratulations, he's going to Slanesh because I can't afford to take the comp hits for Nurgle. And guess what? I can't have two units of skull crushers, so I'll take a hell cannon, and I can't take chariots now. So I got warriors, right? It changes the army list completely based on comp,
Mm-hmm.
right? And based on the objective of the list, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why comp, again, it's I'm not writing the best list I can. I'm writing the best comp list I can. It's just the same thing. Just I think the example when we were discussing this off air was that I said that okay, so I'm playing football. I have a team of X players with X specialties and X positions. I'm not a sports guy, so I'm probably mangling this specifics here. But there's 11 guys on the team, and they go do what they need to do. And then say there's a league next door in another stadium that runs the league as well. The only difference is that there's 10 guys on a team at once instead of 11 on the field at the same time. And then a block away, there's a third league of football that changes the dynamic by saying there's two balls in play at any one time. They're both completely scoring. They both do exactly the same functions, except they score at the same time, like they're played at the same time. That changes dynamically. So, or drastically, I should be saying dynamically. Any kind of change is dynamic. So that's a great sentence. The goal then, as a strategist, as a coach, as a player, is to play optimally in the setting. It's not to play well. You play good, play good. But really, at the end of the day, the goal is still the same: play well. Just I have to do it differently. So this comes back around to why comp is what it is. So when I'm designing a list, I write one that is good for the comp package. So in Warriors of Chaos example, the Demon Prince is too many points to take the way a lot of people would choose to if they were given no restrictions. Like you said, death with either a Nurgle Prince with 1+ armor and all the trimmings and spinning rims is just too many points. So you default to I can't take Juggernauts either because they're a comp point, or more than one unit is. I can't take more than one Hell Cannon because that's a comp point, or two, or three. So then you have to go back to what are considered somewhat substandard choices. So that affects the power balance of the books because the comp package favors or frowns upon certain playstyles. So it makes it so that that's the goal of the actual the thing. So your goal changes. I'm really running in circles here because I'm trying to get this goddamn paint off my fingernail. But the I think again to me that's the issue. It's just that your list will always change depending on the variables. Now that variable is everything from casual to hardcore, tournament to friendly game? Am I playing doubles? Am I playing an apocalypse game? Am I playing a narrative scenario? Am I playing ETC Swedish? Am I playing in a no special characters environment? Am I playing in a mandatory you must take a special character for whatever reason, or who knows? But the environment will always dictate how the list is designed. If we're trying to write an optimal list, then yeah, the optimal list will change based on what your environment is. That's it. That's the end of the story. So, of course, books are going to go up and down based on that. If we play an environment that allows end times as a thing, then of course the Tomb Kings and Vampire counts are going to get a big boost because the Undead Legions gave them both a lot of things that they could really use. The lack of crumbling when the general dies, the ability to pick and choose from both books, stuff like that. The lore of undeath itself, which I guess is standard for everybody now because of the fact everybody can take it. But you know what I mean. If the end times is considered standard, even if special characters aren't, then you get a lot of new bonuses, and maybe the Tomb Kings actually crack out of the bottom tier. Right? Who knows? But so yeah, the goal of an army is 100,000% contingent on the environment it exists in. At least in my mind.
I agree completely. And I guess this will be a spoiler for a an upcoming video. Is I'm about to take place in a UV tournament hosted by Stephen Bradbury. Some of you may know his channel. He's a Warhammer fantasy player out of the UK, and he is decided to host the very first, or at least the first tournament that I know, on UB. If you don't know about it, it's a way to play Warhammer online, and I'm looking forward to it. And
Might want to tell them what UB stands for.
Universal Battle.
There
To
you
those
go.
who didn't know it, but an upcoming video. Hopefully, you and some of our other ETC players will be able to join us, and we'll go over the list that I have and explain why they're designed the way they are, and we'll hopefully come up with a list for this tournament, and hopefully I'll be able to win. And just a bit of a spoiler, I will be going up against some of hopefully the better Warhammer players that there are, like the Sustainable Center, Hammer Bros, Game AZ, Long Island Wargaming, and I hope to pull off a few wins, though more than likely I'm going to get my butt kicked.
Just to clarify, when you say hopefully, you don't mean hopefully they're good. You mean hopefully you'll play these really prominent members in the community?
No, hopefully I won't play them, and they'll all get kicked off first round, and I'll play a bunch of easy players.
Well, I guess you can dream of flying cars and Jaws 14 and hoverboards too, but
reality is reality, and I'll probably, if I beat my first round opponent, I'll probably end up playing them, and I'll be making reports about them. So yeah, any closing thoughts that you have, or any advice to upcoming Warhammer players?
well, I guess closing thoughts would be thank you for inviting me on. I always enjoy these conversations, whether it's online or in real life. At the end of the day, I think composition and wargaming and list building are arts as well as sciences. I think they're infinitely creative endeavors, intellectual experiments, thought experiments, whatever you want to phrase it as. I think they're good. There you go. They're so intellectually provoking that they inspire the word good. There you go. That's my caption for the day. Warhammer is good.
Awesome. One thing that I want to add is that to any new players watching this, if you build a list, your first 10 plus games don't count, as you're just learning the list. And unfortunately, I don't know about you, Zeech, but I've seen several players, they bring a list, they lose a game or two, and like, oh, this list sucks, I can't win it. And you have to go in with the mindset that I'm going to lose a lot of games. I don't care if you're a long-time Warhammer player or a new player. Any new list is going to have its problems, and you just have to stick with it. And after that, you're going to learn how to use lists. You're going to learn I can't do such and such, and you'll get a lot better with it.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's always stick with it, tough it out, right? I mean, if you just like school, right? If you can't figure out multiplication right off the bat, then maybe stick in there, or drop the class. But I think at the end of the day, love what you're doing and have fun with it. But at the end of the day, if it becomes work, then it's really not going to be fun. So, yeah.
Cool. Words of
such
wisdom to live your life by.
such eloquence. Such eloquence.
Yeah. See, now you know why
Ernest,
I hang out with you so much, so I can learn how to live my life properly.
so you can finish sentences with yeah, so that you sound exactly like Ernest Hemingway and William Shakespeare.
Hell yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoy this broadcast, and I hope it will help you design your lists and just give you a bit of food for thought. Uh, Thanks for joining, and have a good one. Peace.
Ciao.